everybody. So, I am so late. That is crazy. Username. There we go. I just realized I was late. So, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? There we go. Oops. Okay. So, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. Can someone tell me what I'm doing? Let's see. Let's see. Copy, link to the tweet, and going live now. There we go. And there. And there. And there we go. And there. I don't know if anybody's here yet. I don't think so. Okay. And there, and there, and there, and there, and there. And retweet with a comment. There, haha, I remembered. Ah, look at that, I remembered my thing. So, what I was going to do is I tried those socks and it didn't, I ended up getting down a bit on them, but I didn't do very well, so I unraveled them. So I'm going to try starting over and going at it again. So first off, I need the needles, or the hooks, not the needles. Those aren't needles, they're hooks. They are needles. I mean, what's wrong with you, Nadine? Okay, what size did I need? This is, this says size 3.5. What does the pattern say? The pattern says 1.5 millimeters. Oh, this is 2.5 millimeters. Or 2.25 millimeters. These are 2.5 millimeters. Yay, there we go. Crochet hooks. Or knitting needles. Oh my gosh. Crochet hooks. What the heck? And I got the other ball is over, put to the side. Because it's a little bit of a mess now because of how I managed to get into it. Now I'm going in and looking for the center of the ball. Because there's this, which is not the center of the ball. It's just the outside edge. There should be a center around here somewhere, and if I can get a hook on it without doing that. I didn't want to quite do that, but hey, you know. That's the way it goes. That's the way the yarn crumbles. You end up getting way too much of the middle. That's the little piece I wanted, but I have to unravel the outside of it first. Without knotting it up. And if I can manage to do that, I'll be golden. Yay, aha, look at that. Hey, there we go. So the pattern again is nearly socks. And yeah. And yes, it is. My dad's name is a good name. There we go. And send. There we go. So that's that. Okay, I'm going to exit there and come back over here. Let's see, where's the pattern at? That's closed. There's the pattern. Exit that. Make the pattern big so I can see it. Now, hi honey, love you too. Yay. Have a good drive. Drive safe. Live chat. There we go. That's really weird. I wonder why that came out like that for. Okay. Now, apparently, to do this, I need to put on a bunch of stitches like this. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's 24. Times 3, approximately, is how much yarn I need to make the tail. There we go. And a little bit for good luck. Because if I end up getting it too short, then I start saying bad words, and that's just not going to end well. So I'm going to start the chat, and I kind of moved my camera a bit so that it's more practically right above me, so that you can see more from my point of view instead of seeing from anywhere else. There we go. Now I'm going to do the magic stuff, as some people have said. And I'm just going to do this. So what I've got to do is I'm making the pattern, or making this a bit bigger than the pattern, because my feet are so wide. So my feet are short and kind of small, but they're really wide, and I can't get my foot into anything because my arch is so high, and all that kind of fun stuff that people with funny feet have problems with. Whoops. So I guess I might as well start the book, hey? So it's Japanese, let's see, Japanese fairy tales. And we're playing the story of Urashima Taro, the fisher lad, and the farmer and the badger. Oh, there's a story about Badger. I wonder where Badger is. Open a new tab, open a new tab. So, I'm gonna have to tell Badger. Let's see. Tempered Badger 1. The stories is about you. Sweet. Ha ha ha. There. I'm a little stinker. I know I am. So, I'm gonna play the first
Chapter
one.
3 of Japanese Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording by Winna Hathaway. Japanese Fairy Tales by Yei Theodora OZAKI. Chapter 3. The Story of Urashima Taro, the Fisher Lad. Long, long ago, in the province of Tango, there lived on the shore of Japan, in the little fishing village of Misanoye, a young fisherman named Urashima Taro. His father had been a fisherman before him, and his skill had more than doubly descended to his son, for Urashima was the most skillful fisher in all that countryside, and could catch more bonito and tai in a day than his comrades could in a week. But in the little fishing village, more than for being a clever fisher of the sea was he known for his kind heart. In his whole life he had never hurt anything, either great or small, and when a boy, his companions had always laughed at him, for he would never join with them in teasing animals, but always tried to keep them from this cruel sport. One soft summer twilight he was going home at the end of a day's fishing when he came upon a group of children. They were all screaming and talking at the tops of their voices, and seemed to be in a state of great excitement about something. And on his going up to them to see what was the matter, he saw that they were tormenting a tortoise. First one boy pulled it this way, then another boy pulled it that way, while a third child beat it with a stick, and the fourth hammered its shell with a stone. Now Urashima felt very sorry for the poor tortoise, and made up his mind to rescue it. He spoke to the boys. "Look here, boys, you're treating that poor tortoise so badly that it will soon die." The boys, who were all of an age when children seem to delight in being cruel to animals, took no notice of Urashima's gentle reproof, but went on teasing it as before. One of the older boys answered, "Who cares whether it lives or dies? We do not. Here, boys, go on, go on." And they began to treat the poor tortoise more cruelly than ever. Urashima waited a moment, turning over in his mind what would be the best way to deal with the boys. He would try to persuade them to give the tortoise up to him, so he smiled at them and said, "I am sure you're all good, kind boys. Now won't you give me the tortoise? I should like to have it so much." "No, we won't give you the tortoise," said one of the boys. "Why should we? We caught it ourselves." "What you say is true," said Urashima, "but I do not ask you to give it to me for nothing. I will give you some money for it. In other words, the Oji-san, uncle, will buy it of you. Won't that do for you, my boys?" He held up the money to them, strung on a piece of string through a hole in the center of each coin. "Look, boys, you can buy anything you like with this money. You can do much more with this money than you can with that poor tortoise. See what good boys you are to listen to me." The boys were not bad boys at all. They were only mischievous, and as Urashima spoke, they were won by his kind smile and gentle words, and began to be of his spirit, as they say in Japan. Gradually they all came up to him, the ringleader of the little band holding out the tortoise to him. "Very well, Oji-san, we will give you the tortoise if you will give us the money." And Urashima took the tortoise and gave the money to the boys, who, calling to each other, scampered away and were soon out of sight. Then Urashima stroked the tortoise's back, saying as he did so, "Oh, you poor thing, poor thing! There, there, you're safe now. They say that the stork lives for 1,000 years, but the tortoise for 10,000 years. You have the longest life of any creature in this world, and you're in great danger of having that precious life cut short by those cruel boys. Luckily I was passing by and saved you, and so life is still yours. Now I'm going to take you back to your home, the sea, at once. Do not let yourself be caught again, for there might be no one to save you next time." All the time that the kind fisherman was speaking, he was walking quickly to the shore and out upon the rocks. Then, putting the tortoise into the water, he watched the animal disappear, and turned homewards himself, for he was tired and the sun had set. The next morning Urashima went out as usual in his boat. The weather was fine, and the sea and sky were both blue and soft in the tender haze of the summer morning. Urashima got into his boat and dreamily pushed out to sea, throwing his line as he did so. He soon passed the other fishing boats and left them behind him till they were lost to sight in the distance, and his boat drifted further and further out upon the blue waters. Somehow, he knew not why, he felt unusually happy that morning, and he could not help wishing that, like the tortoise he set free the day before, he had thousands of years to live instead of his own short span of human life. He was suddenly startled from his reverie by hearing his own name called. "Urashima! Urashima!" Clear as a bell and soft as the summer wind, the name floated over the sea. He stood up and looked in every direction, thinking that one of the other boats had overtaken him, but gaze as he might over the wide expanse of water, near or far, there was no sign of a boat, so the voice could not have come from any human being. Startled and wondering who or what it was that had called him so clearly, he looked in all directions round about him and saw that, without knowing it, a tortoise had come to the side of the boat. Urashima saw with surprise that it was the very tortoise he had rescued the day before. "Well, Mr. Tortoise," said Urashima, "was it you who called my name just now?" The tortoise nodded its head several times and said, "Yes, it was I. Yesterday, in your honorable shadow, Okage-sama Day, my life was saved, and I have come to offer you my thanks and to tell you how grateful I am for your kindness to me." "Indeed," said Urashima, "that is very polite of you. Come up into the boat. I would offer you a smoke, but as you are a tortoise, doubtless you do not smoke." And the fisherman laughed at his joke. "He he he he," laughed the tortoise. "Sake, rice wine, is my favorite refreshment, but I do not care for tobacco." "Indeed," said Urashima, "I regret very much that I have no sake in my boat to offer you, but come up and dry your back in the sun. Tortoises always love to do that." So the tortoise climbed into the boat, the fisherman helping him, and after an exchange of complimentary speeches, the tortoise said, "Have you ever seen Rinjin, the palace of the Dragon King of the Sea, Urashima?" The fisherman shook his head and replied, "No, year after year the sea has been my home, but though I have often heard of the Dragon King's realm under the sea, I have never yet set eyes on that wonderful place. It must be very far away, if it exists at all." "Is that really so? You have never seen the Sea King's palace? Then you have missed seeing one of the most wonderful sights in the whole universe. It is far away at the bottom of the sea, but if I take you there, we shall soon reach the place. If you would like to see the Sea King's land, I will be your guide." "I should like to go there, certainly, and you are very kind to think of taking me, but you must remember that I am only a poor mortal, and I have not the power of swimming like a sea creature such as you are." Before the fisherman could say more, the tortoise stopped him, saying, "What? You need not swim yourself. If you ride on my back, I will take you without any trouble on your part." "But," said Urashima, "how is it possible for me to ride on your small back?" "It may seem absurd to you, but I assure you that you can do so. Try at once. Just come and get on my back, and see if it is as impossible as you think." As the tortoise finished speaking, Urashima looked at its shell, and strange to say, he saw that the creature had suddenly grown so big that a man could easily sit on its back. "This is strange indeed," said Urashima. "Then, Mr. Tortoise, with your kind permission, I will get on your back. Dokoisho." Footnote: all right. Only used by lower classes. He exclaimed as he jumped on. The tortoise, with an unmoved face, as if this strange proceeding were quite an ordinary event, said, "Now we will set out at our leisure." And with these words he leapt into the sea, with Urashima on his back. Down through the water the tortoise dived. For a long time these two strange companions rowed through the sea. Urashima never grew tired, nor his clothes moist with water. At last, far away in the distance, a magnificent gate appeared, and behind the gate the long sloping roofs of a palace on the horizon. "Yeah," exclaimed Urashima, "that looks like the gate of some large palace just appearing. Mr. Tortoise, can you tell what that palace is we can now see?" "That is the great gate of the Rinjin Palace. The large roof that you see behind the gate is the Sea King's palace itself." "Then we have at last come to the realm of the Sea King and to his palace," said Urashima. "Yes, indeed," answered the tortoise. "And don't you think we have come very quickly?" And while he was speaking, the tortoise reached the side of the gate. "And here we are, and you must please walk from here." The tortoise now went in front, and speaking to the gatekeeper said, "This is Urashima Taro, from the country of Japan. I've had the honor of bringing him as a visitor to this kingdom. Please show him the way." Then the gatekeeper, who was a fish, at once led the way through the gate before them. The red bream, the flounder, the sole, the cuttlefish, and all the chief vassals of the Dragon King of the Sea now came out with courtly bows to welcome the stranger. "Urashima-sama! Urashima-sama! Welcome to the Sea Palace, the home of the Dragon King of the Sea. Thrice welcome are you, having come from such a distant country. And you, Mr. Tortoise, we are greatly indebted to you for all your trouble in bringing Urashima here." Then, turning again to Urashima, they said, "Please follow us this way." And from here the whole band of fishes became his guides. Urashima, being only a poor fisher lad, did not know how to behave in a palace. But, strange though it was all to him, he did not feel ashamed or embarrassed, but followed his kind guides quite calmly where they led to the inner palace. When he reached the portals, a beautiful princess with her attendant maidens came out to welcome him. She was more beautiful than any human being, and was robed in flowing garments of red and soft green, like the underside of a wave, and golden threads glimmered through the folds of her gown. Her lovely black hair streamed over her shoulders in the fashion of a king's daughter many hundreds of years ago, and when she spoke, her voice sounded like music over the water. Urashima was lost in wonder while he looked upon her, and he could not speak. Then he remembered that he ought to bow, but before he could make a low obeisance, the princess took him by the hand and led him to a beautiful hall and to the seat of honor at the upper end, and bade him be seated. "Urashima Taro, it gives me the highest pleasure to welcome you to my father's kingdom," said the princess. "Yesterday you set free a tortoise, and I have sent for you to thank you for saving my life, for I was that tortoise. Now if you like you shall live here forever in the land of eternal youth, where summer never dies and where sorrow never comes, and I will be your bride if you will. We will live together happily forever afterwards." And as Urashima listened to her sweet words and gazed upon her lovely face, his heart was filled with a great wonder and joy, and he answered her, wondering if it was not all a dream. "Thank you 1,000 times for your kind speech. There is nothing I could wish for more than to be permitted to stay here with you in this beautiful land, of which I have often heard, but have never seen to this day. Beyond all words, this is the most wonderful place I have ever seen." While he was speaking, a train of fishes appeared, all dressed in ceremonial trailing garments. One by one, silently and with stately steps, they entered the hall, bearing on coral trays delicacies of fish and seaweed, such as no one can dream of, and this wondrous feast was set before the bride and bridegroom. The bridal was celebrated with dazzling splendor, and in the Sea King's realm there was great rejoicing. As soon as the young pair had pledged themselves in the wedding cup of wine, 3 times 3, music was played, and songs were sung, and fishes with silver scales and golden tails stepped in from the waves and danced. Urashima enjoyed himself with all his heart. Never in his whole life had he sat down to such a marvelous feast. When the feast was over, the princess asked the bridegroom if he would like to walk through the palace and see all there was to be seen. Then the happy fisherman, following his bride, the Sea King's daughter, was shown all the wonders of that enchanted land where youth and joy go hand in hand, and neither time nor age can touch them. The palace was built of coral and adorned with pearls, and the beauties and wonders of the place were so great that the tongue fails to describe them. But to Urashima more wonderful than the palace was the garden that surrounded it. Here was to be seen at one time the scenery of the 4 different seasons. The beauties of summer and winter, spring and autumn, were displayed to the wondering visitor at once. First, when he looked to the east, the plum and cherry trees were seen in full bloom, the nightingales sang in the pink avenues, and butterflies flitted from flower to flower. Looking to the south, all the trees were green in the fullest of summer, and the day cicada and the night cricket chirped loudly. Looking to the west, the autumn maples were ablaze like a sunset sky, and the chrysanthemums were in perfection. Looking to the north, the change made Urashima start, for the ground was silver white with snow, and trees and bamboos were also covered with snow, and the pond was thick with ice. And each day there were new joys and new wonders for Urashima, and so great was his happiness that he forgot everything, even the home he had left behind, and his parents and his own country, and 3 days passed without his even thinking of all he had left behind. Then his mind came back to him, and he remembered who he was, and that he did not belong to this wonderful land or the Sea King's palace, and he said to himself, "Oh dear, I must not stay on here, for I have an old father and mother at home. What can have happened to them all this time? How anxious they must have been these days when I did not return as usual. I must go back at once without letting one more day pass." And he began to prepare for the journey in great haste. Then he went to his beautiful wife, the princess, and bowing low before her, he said, "Indeed, I have been very happy with you for a long time, Otohime-sama," for that was her name, "and you have been kinder to me than any words can tell. But now I must say good-bye. I must go back to my old parents." Then Otohime-sama began to weep and said softly and sadly, "Is it not well with you here, Urashima, that you wish to leave me so soon? Where is the haste? Stay with me yet another day only." But Urashima had remembered his old parents, and in Japan the duty to parents is stronger than everything else, stronger even than pleasure or love, and he would not be persuaded, but answered, "Indeed, I must go. Do not think that I wish to leave you. It is not that. I must go and see my old parents. Let me go for one day, and I will come back to you." "Then," said the princess sorrowfully, "there is nothing to be done. I will send you back today to your father and mother, and instead of trying to keep you with me one more day, I shall give you this as a token of our love. Please take it back with you." And she brought him a beautiful lacquer box tied about with a silken cord and tassels of red silk. Urashima had received so much from the princess already that he felt some compunction in taking the gift, and said, "It does not seem right for me to take yet another gift from you after all the many favors I have received at your hands, but because it is your wish I will do so." And then he added, "Tell me, what is this box?" "That," answered the princess, "is the Tamate Bako, box of the jewel hand, and it contains something very precious. You must not open this box, whatever happens. If you open it, something dreadful will happen to you. Now promise me that you will never open this box." And Urashima promised that he would never, never open the box, whatever happened. Then, bidding goodbye to Otohime-sama, and went down to the seashore, the princess and her attendants following him, and there he found a large tortoise waiting for him. He quickly mounted the creature's back and was carried away over the shining sea into the east. He looked back to wave his hand to Otohime-sama, till at last he could see her no more, and the land of the Sea King and the roofs of the wonderful palace were lost in the far, far distance. Then, with his face turned eagerly towards his own land, he looked for the rising of the blue hills on the horizon before him. At last the tortoise carried him into the bay he knew so well, and to the shore from whence he had set out. He stepped onto the shore and looked about him, while the tortoise rowed away back to the Sea King's realm. But what is the strange fear that seizes Urashima as he stands and looks about him? Why does he gaze so fixedly at the people that pass him by, and why do they in turn stand and look at him? The shore is the same and the hills are the same, but the people that he sees walking past him have very different faces to those he had known so well before. Wondering what it can mean, he walks quickly towards his old home. Even that looks different, but a house stands on the spot, and he calls out, "Father, I have just returned," and he was about to enter when he saw a strange man coming out. "Perhaps my parents have moved while I have been away, and have gone somewhere else," was the fisherman's thought. Somehow he began to feel strangely anxious. He could not tell why. "Excuse me," said he to the man who was staring at him, "but till within the last few days I have lived in this house. My name is Urashima Taro. Where have my parents gone whom I have left here?" A very bewildered expression came over the face of the man, and, still gazing intently on Urashima's face, he said, "What? Are you Urashima Taro?" "Yes," said the fisherman, "I am Urashima Taro."
"Ha, ha!" laughed the man. "You must not make such jokes. It is true that once upon a time a man called Urashima Taro did live in this village, but that is a story 300 years old. He could not possibly be alive now."
When Urashima heard these strange words he was frightened and said, "Please, please, you must not joke with me. I am greatly perplexed. I am really Urashima Taro, and I certainly have not lived 300 years. Till 4 or 5 days ago I lived on this spot. Tell me what I want to know without more joking, please." But the man's face grew more and more grave, and he answered, "You may or may not be Urashima Taro. I don't know. But the Urashima Taro of whom I have heard is a man who lived 300 years ago. Perhaps you are his spirit come to revisit your old home."
"Why do you mock me?"
said Urashima.
"I am no spirit. I am a living man. Do you not see my feet and dondon?"
He stamped on the ground, first with one foot and then with the other to show the man. Japanese ghosts have no feet.
"But Urashima Taro lived 300 years ago. That is all I know. It is written in the village chronicles,"
persisted the man, who could not believe what the fisherman said. Urashima was lost in bewilderment and trouble. He stood looking all around him, terribly puzzled, and indeed something in the appearance of everything was different to what he remembered before he went away, and the awful feeling came over him that what the man said was perhaps true. He seemed to be in a strange dream. The few days he had spent in the Sea King's palace beyond the sea had not been days at all. They had been hundreds of years, and in that time his parents had died and all the people he had ever known, and the village had written down his story. There was no use in staying here any longer. He must get back to his beautiful wife beyond the sea. He made his way back to the beach, carrying in his hand the box which the princess had given him. But which was the way? He could not find it alone. Suddenly he remembered the box, the tamate buckle. The princess told me, when she gave me the box, never to open it, that it contained a very precious thing. But now that I have no home, now that I have lost everything that was dear to me here, and my heart grows thin with sadness at such a time, if I open the box, surely I shall find something that will help me, something that will show me the way back to my beautiful princess over the sea. There is nothing else for me to do now. Yes, yes, I will open the box and look in." And so his heart consented to this act of disobedience, He tried to persuade himself that he was doing the right thing in breaking his promise. Slowly, very slowly, he untied the red silk cord. Slowly and wonderingly, he lifted the lid of the precious box. And what did he find? Strange to say, only a beautiful little purple cloud rose out of the box in 3 soft wisps. For an instant it covered his face and wavered over him as if loath to go, and then it floated away like a vapor over the sea. Urashima, who had been till that moment like a strong and handsome youth of 24, suddenly became very, very old. His back doubled up with age, his hair turned snowy white, his face wrinkled, and he fell down dead on the beach. Poor Urashima! Because of his disobedience, he could never return to the Sea King's realm or the lovely princess beyond the sea. Little children, never be disobedient to those who are wiser than you, for disobedience was the beginning of all the miseries and sorrows of life. End of Chapter 3. Recording by Winna Hathaway in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Holy cow, what a twist ending. He opened the box and he died. Oh my goodness, holy cow. Badger, 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 badger. Now is the badger, blah, 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 blah. Now is the badger book. It is the farmer and the badger. So, I'll mute myself first. Aha.
Chapter 4 of Japanese Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Eliza Horn. Japanese Fairy Tales by Yei Theodora OZAKI. Chapter 4. The Farmer and the Badger. Long, long ago, there lived an old farmer and his wife who had made their house in the mountains, far from any town. Their only neighbor was a bad and malicious badger. This badger used to come out every night and run across the farmer's field, and spoil the vegetables and the rice which the farmer spent his time in carefully cultivating. The badger at last grew so ruthless in his malicious work, and did so much harm everywhere on the farm, that the good-natured farmer could not stand it any longer, and determined to put a stop to it. So he lay in wait day after day and night after night with a big club, hoping to catch the badger, but all in vain. Then he laid traps for the wicked animal. The farmer's trouble and patience was rewarded, for one fine day, on going his rounds, he found the badger caught in a hole he had dug for that purpose. The farmer was delighted at having caught his enemy, and carried him home securely bound with rope. When he reached the house, the farmer said to his wife, "I've at last caught the bad badger. You must keep an eye on him, while I go out to work, and not let him escape, because I want to make him into soup tonight." Saying this, he hung the badger up to the rafters in the storehouse, and went out to his work in the fields. The badger was in great distress. He did not at all like the idea of being made into soup that night, and he thought and thought for a long time, trying to hit upon some plan by which he might escape. It was hard to think clearly in his uncomfortable position, for he had been hung upside down. Very near him, at the entrance of the storehouse, looking out towards the green fields and the trees and the pleasant sunrise, stood the farmer's old wife pounding barley. She looked tired and old. Her face was seamed with many wrinkles, and was as brown as leather, and every now and then she stopped to wipe the perspiration which rolled down her face. "Dear lady," said the wily badger. "You must be very weary doing such work in your old age. Won't you let me do that for you? My arms are very strong, and I could relieve you for a while." "Thank you for your kindness," said the old woman, "but I cannot let you do this work for me because I must not untie you, for you might escape if I did, and my husband would be very angry if he came home and found you gone." Now the badger is one of the most cunning of animals, and he said again in a very sad, gentle voice, "You are very unkind. You might untie me, for I promise not to try to escape. If you are afraid of your husband, I will let you bind me again before his return when I have finished pounding the body. I am so tired and sore tied up like this. If you would only let me down for a few minutes, I would indeed be thankful." The old woman had a good and simple nature, and could not think badly of anyone. Much less did she think that the badger was only deceiving her in order to get away. She felt sorry too for the animal as she turned to look at him. He looked in such a sad plight, hanging downwards from the ceiling by his legs, which were all tied together so tightly that the rope and the knots were cutting into the skin. So, in the kindness of her heart, and believing the creature's promise that he would not run away, she untied the cord and let him down. The old woman then gave him the wooden pestle, and told him to do the work for a short time while she rested. He took the pestle, but instead of doing the work as he was told, the badger at once sprang upon the old woman and knocked her down with the heavy piece of wood. He then killed her, and cut her up and made soup of her, and waited for the return of the old farmer. The old man worked hard in the fields all day, and as he worked he thought with pleasure that no more now would his labour be spoiled by the destructive badger. Towards sunset he left his work and turned to go home. He was very tired, but the thought of the nice supper of hot badger soup awaiting his return cheered him. The thought that the badger might get free and take revenge on the poor old woman never once came into his mind. The badger meanwhile assumed the old woman's form, and as soon as he saw the old farmer approaching, came out to greet him on the veranda of the little house, saying, "So you've come back at last. I have made the badger soup and have been waiting for you for a long time." The old farmer quickly took off his straw sandals and sat down before his tiny dinner tray. The innocent man never even dreamed that it was not his wife but the badger who was waiting upon him, and asked at once for the soup. Then the badger suddenly transformed himself back into his natural form and cried out, "You wife-eating old man, look out for the bones in the kitchen!" Laughing loudly and deviously he escaped out of the house and ran away to his den in the hills. The old man was left behind alone. He could hardly believe what he had seen and heard. Then, when he understood the whole truth, he was so scared and horrified that he fainted right away. After a while he came around and burst into tears. He cried loudly and bitterly. He rocked himself to and fro in his hopeless grief. It seemed too terrible to be real that his faithful old wife had been killed and cooked by the badger, while he worked quietly in the fields, knowing nothing of what was going on at home, and congratulating himself on having once and for all gotten rid of the wicked animal who had so often spoiled his fields. And oh, the terrible thought that he had very nearly drunk the soup which the creature had made of his poor old woman. "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear!" he wailed aloud. Now, not far away there lived in the same mountain a kind, good-natured old rabbit. He heard the old man crying and sobbing, and at once set out to see what was the matter, and if there was anything he could do to help his neighbour. The old man told him all that had happened. When the rabbit heard the story he was very angry at the wicked and deceitful badger, and told the old man to leave everything to him and he would avenge his wife's death. The farmer was at last comforted and wiped away his tears. Thanking the rabbit for his goodness in coming to him in his distress, the rabbit, seeing that the farmer was growing calmer, went back to his home to lay plans for the punishment of the badger. The next day the weather was fine and the rabbit went out to find the badger. He was not to be seen in the woods or on the hillside or in the fields anywhere, so the rabbit went to his den and found the badger hiding there, for the animal had been afraid to show himself ever since he had escaped from the farmer's house for fear of the old man's wrath. The rabbit called out, "Why are you not out on such a beautiful day? Come out with me, and we will go and cut grass on the hill together." The badger, never doubting but that the rabbit was his friend, willingly consented to go out with him, only too glad to get away from the neighbourhood of the farmer and the fear of meeting him. The rabbit led the way miles away from their homes, out on the hills where the grass grew tall and thick and sweet. They both set to work to cut down as much as they could carry home, to store up for their winter's food. When they had each cut down all they wanted, they tied it in bundles and then started homeward, each carrying his bundle of grass on his back. This time the rabbit made the badger go first. When they had gone a little way, the rabbit took out a flint and steel, and, striking it over the badger's back as he stepped along in front, set his bundle of grass on fire. The badger heard the flint striking and asked, "What is that noise? Crack, crack." "Oh, that is nothing," replied the rabbit. "I only said crack, crack because this mountain is called Crackle Mountain." The fire soon spread in the bundle of dry grass on the badger's back. The badger, hearing the crackle of the burning grass, asked, "What is that?" "Now we have come to the burning mountain," answered the rabbit. By this time the bundle was nearly burned out, and all the hair had been burnt off the badger's back. He now knew what had happened by the smell of the smoke of the burning grass. Screaming with pain, the badger ran as fast as he could to his hole. The rabbit followed, and found him lying on his bed groaning with pain. "What an unlucky fellow you are," said the rabbit. "I can't imagine how this happened. I will bring you some medicine which will heal your back quickly." The rabbit went away glad and smiling to think that the punishment upon the badger had already begun. He hoped that the badger would die from his burns, for he felt that nothing could be too bad for the animal who was guilty of murdering a poor helpless old woman who had trusted him. He went home and made an ointment by mixing some sauce and red pepper together. He carried this to the badger, but before putting it on he told him that it would cause him great pain, but that he must bear it patiently, because it was a very wonderful medicine for burns and scalds and such wounds. The badger thanked him and begged him to apply it at once. But no language can describe the agony of the badger as soon as the red pepper had been pasted all over his sore back. He rolled over and over and howled loudly. The rabbit, looking on, felt that the farmer's wife was beginning to be avenged. The badger was in bed for about a month, but at last, in spite of the red pepper application, the burns healed and he got well. When the rabbit saw that the badger was getting well, he thought of another plan by which he could compass the creature's death. So he went one day to pay the badger a visit and to congratulate him on his recovery. During the conversation the rabbit mentioned that he was going fishing, and described how pleasant fishing was when the weather was fine and the sea smooth. The badger listened with pleasure to the rabbit's account of the way he passed his time now, and forgot all his pains and his month's illness, and thought what fun it would be if he could go fishing too. So he asked the rabbit if he would take him the next time he went out to fish. This was just what the rabbit wanted, so he agreed. Then he went home and built 2 boats, one of wood and the other of clay. At last they were both finished, and as the rabbit stood and looked at his work he felt that all his troubles would be well rewarded if his plan succeeded, and he could manage to kill the wicked badger now. The day came when the rabbit had arranged to take the badger fishing. He kept the wooden boat himself and gave the badger the clay boat. The badger, who knew nothing about boats, was delighted with his new boat, and thought how kind it was of the rabbit to give it to him. They both got into their boats and set out. After going some distance from the shore, the rabbit proposed that they should try their boats and see which one could go the quickest. The badger fell in with the proposal, and they both set to work to row as fast as they could for some time. In the middle of the race the badger found his boat going to pieces, for the water now began to soften the clay. He cried out in great fear to the rabbit to help him, but the rabbit answered that he was avenging the old woman's murder, and that this had been his intention all along, and that he was happy to think that the badger had at last met his deserts for all his evil crimes, and was to drown with no one to help him. Then he raised his oar and struck the badger with all his strength, till he fell with the sinking clay boat and was seen no more. Thus at last he kept his promise to the old farmer. The rabbit now turned and rowed shoreward, and having landed and pulled his boat upon the beach, hurried back to tell the old farmer everything, and how the badger his enemy had been killed. The old farmer thanked him with tears in his eyes. He said that till now he could never sleep at night or be at peace in the daytime, thinking of how his wife's death was unavenged, but from this time he would be able to sleep and eat as of old. He begged the rabbit to stay with him and share his home. So from this day the rabbit went to stay with the old farmer, and they both lived together as good friends to the end of their days. The end of Chapter 4. The Farmer and the Badger. Recorded by Eliza Horn.
Wow, that was some story. Oh my goodness. Man, I didn't realize it was like that. I'm sorry, Badger. Oh my goodness. That was something. They ate, they did some bad things to the badger. Oh my gosh. Yeah, they are. It's like worse than the Grimm fairy tales. Rabbit soup, badger, rabbit soup, have your revenge. They are brutal. Holy cow. But then, the Grimm fairy tales aren't much better, and Aesop fairy tales, I've played those on here too, so they're pretty grim too. Oh my gosh, that was crazy. So I'm starting a new ball with with that pattern for the socks because I messed up the other one, and I'm like, I'm just gonna start over, and maybe I'll get it right. Sabbat Roop? Is your Lixtexia getting to you again after all backwards? You're getting upset now. I know, it's something funny, eh? Oh my gosh. It was like, what the heck's going on? This is so dark. And, well, I'm going to finish the stories. So there's 22 stories in this book of fairy tales. So unless somebody requests something different, these are the ones I'm going to be playing until they're done. So, but so on Tuesday, yeah. Tuesday we should be playing the Shinanista, or South Pointing Carriage, the adventure of Kinatro the Golden Boy, and the story of Princess Hazis, Hazi, Hase. So we'll probably be doing those 3 on Tuesday. So awesome. It's awesome, Wonder Lady. That's great. I'm quite enjoying them too. They're pretty. Oh my goodness! But still, it's like I said, it's not much difference than any other of the fairy tales we've listened to on here. They are pretty brutal. That first one was brutal too. The Fisher lad. It's like, wow, he died at the end. It's all crazy. So, I'm going to leave you guys there. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. I really appreciate it. If you have any requests, remember it's at LibriVox. Oops, wrong window. I can't copy and paste the link out. It's at LibriVox.org is where I'm getting my books from. They're all old books, but, you know, they're not copyrighted, so, or they're public domain, technically. So, I want to keep with that so that we don't have to run into any issues. I've run into a couple, but I just sent them links to the stories that I played, and it's been quite easily resolved that way. So, yeah, so thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you can join me next time, Thursday at around 6 Central. It's, excuse me, wow, all of a sudden. It's 8:30 my time, 6 Central. We'll be doing a couple of more of the books, and yeah, so thank you so much, and Faye, and sorry, Badger, I didn't know you was gonna eat your kin, and Wonder Lady, honey, I'll talk to you after, okay? Love you guys. Thanks for joining me. Bye.